Welcome back to Wellness Wave Radio. Thanks for tuning in this morning to ride the wave with us. Each week our goal is to give you at least one suggestion that will make your life a little better. My name is Phil George. I'm a clinical biochemist, a certified personal trainer, and a health coach. Please remember, everything we discuss on the show is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Always seek the guidance of a medical professional. Just want to mention we have a big seminar coming up June 29th at 184 West Boylston Street. I'm going to be there with my good friend Kelly Hamilton. She's an ICU nurse, and she's also a certified holistic nutritionist. We run it kind of like a game show. We give out prizes and stuff. In fact, if you email me, philgeorge@charter.net, and let me know you're coming and you show up, basically we're gonna give out random gift cards to New Kitchen. So you put your name in the hat, pick out some names, you get to win it. But even if you don't win that, when I ask questions during the seminar, and if you get those questions right, again, you get to pick up prizes. We have a whole bunch of prizes donated by various sponsors. So again, it's kind of like a game show. It's a lot of fun. The last seminar we did last month, we're going to do it once a month. And this particular seminar, we took in questions from various people in terms of what they wanted for topics. So the topic is going to be weight loss, specifically intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating. That's a big thing now. So if you're looking to get into bikini weather or Speedo weather, then basically, check into this. Obviously, you want to be healthy. So come on down, email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I'll send you the information and put you basically in our hat to win a prize. Today's show we're going to talk about, it's kind of had a theme. Last week we had on what's called a direct primary care doctor and her husband, who's a clinical biochemist like me, and we talked about it. But I've also talked to a lot of other medical professionals, and I think most people know our medical system is in trouble. I mean, I remember like when the dinosaurs ruled the earth, when I was working in a hospital, we didn't have this kind of wait in emergency rooms. We could see a doctor in a reasonable amount of time. And, we could have stuff done. Now there's like weeks and months wait. And the other thing is doctors just don't have time for you anymore. Again, going back 20 years or so, when I was in the hospital, most doctors were in what they call private practice, which means they were in charge. They paid their malpractice insurance. They had their office, and maybe way back when they actually wound up doing house visits. They actually go out and see at the house. Those days are gone. But there was a whole different healthcare system. In fact, people have lived in this area for a while. With the general central Massachusetts area, you probably remember we had UMass, which was a public company. Then we had Memorial, which was a private hospital. We had Fairlawn Hospital. In fact, Fairlawn was a big one. No, it was Hahnemann. We had Hahnemann Hospital, which was a big one for birthing. So there was a lot of little hospitals, and they were all independent. So if you didn't like X hospital, you can go to Y hospital. But that's not the case anymore. Basically, I think most people know there are two big players here, and one of them is UMass, and the other one's St. Thieves. And I'm not saying anything bad about either one of those hospitals, but I just saw in the paper, I don't know, in 6 months into the year, I don't know how much UMass is like millions and millions of dollars in debt. I mean, they're not even making any money. The other thing with what's happened is there's what they call, this is economics, there's economy and scale. So if you have a really big institution, you have a lot more buying power. You can buy a lot more things. If you want to buy more gauze or buy more needles or buy more this or buy more that, it's a lot cheaper. But again, you lose a lot of the of being able to actually take care of patients because you're kind of looking at the bottom line all the time. The other thing what's happened, as I mentioned before, most doctors were in private practice, which means they could do what they thought was best. Majority of doctors now, they're actually employees of the hospital, which means they get paid. They're on salary. They get paid X amount of dollars. So they don't have this autonomy where they can kind of do what they think is best because they have people watching them in terms of what they're doing. So they get a CEO out of Harvard, basically, with an MBA. And I'm not going to mention that I have a physician that's actually a friend of mine, and this actually happened to him. So if you guys are familiar with HMOs, what happens with HMOs, you can't see a specialist unless you're referred to by your primary care. They're what they call the gatekeeper. So this particular doctor, he had a private practice, and what he did is a big hospital came in. I'm not going to mention which hospital it was. They came in and they said, we're going to kind of make you an offer you can't refuse. They said, because what we want to do, we want to take over your practice. We're going to pay your malpractice. We're going to put office staff here. But we're going to also, our HMO, our primary care doctors, which are, again, all part of this gigantic hospital, they're going to go in there and they're going to, we'll refer, patients. He was a specialist. And they said, if you don't come along with us, then, it's not much incentive for us. They didn't blackmail him or anything, but they're just saying there's not incentive for us to refer patients over to you. So he had the potential of losing a lot of his client base by doing that. So obviously, you got to make money, you got to feed your family. So he said, I'll give it a shot. So he gave it a shot for a while. And what he found was once a month, they would have one of the MBA people come in that weren't physicians and say to him, well, maybe you need to see more patients, maybe you need to do this. And they were kind of micromanaging him on what he should do. And he didn't like that. He didn't think he could actually give his patients the kind of care that he thought that they should have. And eventually he broke off and he went back into private practice. So I think you can see the conflict of interest here. And the average doctor comes out of medical school with $500,000 in debt. Okay, so they got a huge amount of debt to pay. So they're working and they're trying to pay off their debt. They got a house, they got this, they got that. And again, this is tough. I don't blame physicians. Physicians go into medicine for the right reasons. They want to help people. But if you got a mortgage, you got car payments, you got this, you got that, and you're an employee of a hospital, you kind of have to do what they want you to do. So they're kind of in a sticky situation. So on last week, I've had a lot of medical professionals that have left, the corporate entity, the big hospitals, and went back into private practice. That's kind of difficult. Think about this. They have to pay their own malpractice insurance. They're going to have their own staff. So they have to be in the profession for a while to have the autonomy and the funds to get out of the system. Most new doctors can't do that. They just financially, they just can't do it. So they have to kind of stay in the system. So last week I had on what's called a direct primary care doctor. And what that is basically, that's a doctor. Let me just back up with her. And her husband, as I mentioned, her husband is a clinical biochemist like me. And she had worked in I'm not going to say which branch, but one of the larger hospital branches, hospital systems in Central Mass. And she said to her husband, she says, I can't help my patients anymore. She says, I got 15 minutes. I think she said 12 or 13 minutes now. I get them in, get them out. The expression is now diagnose and adios. Get you in, get you out. They don't have time to sit down with you and say, what are you eating? Are you exercising? Are you depressed? Are you this? Are you that? What they're basically going to do, they're going to find out, they're going to diagnose you, they're going to write down the diagnosis, whatever, high blood pressure. And by the way, most diseases are what they call idiopathic. And all that means is we don't know what's causing it. They don't know what's causing it, but they're going to give you a prescription for it. So as a clinical biochemist, what I want to know is what they call root cause. In fact, I'm a dues-paying member of a group called Root Cause Practitioners. I want to know what's causing the problem, what's causing your high blood pressure, what's causing your insulin resistance, your type 2 diabetes, as opposed to just throwing insulin at you, and metformin and stuff like that. So I want to know, and that's when I see clients, what I do is I look at all their lab work, I see what the lab work says, and that tells me a lot. The lab work, I can recommend new lab work that should be ordered that they may not order. So what this direct primary care physician said, and I was sitting here, and she was sitting here, and her husband was sitting right here, and she said to her husband, he says, look, you're not happy with what you're doing. You don't feel like you didn't come into this profession just to run, basically, patients in, patients out. You want to really help patients. So she came into it, And there's two kinds of doctors that do this. One of them is called the direct primary care. The other one is called the concierge doctor. I'll get into both of those in a second. But other thing I want to mention, your health is the most important thing. Okay, and you can have all the money in the world, but if you have lousy health, I mean, what does the money really mean to you? So you really got to take care of your health. You got to be the CEO of your own health. I'm here to help you. Basically, you can email me, philgeorge@charter.net. Any questions? In fact, a lot of the questions I get, I'll read them on the air. I won't mention your name, but if you have problems, other people have problems. I have a lot of people emailing me about prostate cancer, breast cancer, cancer in general. We talk about that stuff. So, it's not medical advice, but I can give you my opinion. In fact, what I say to everybody, all my clients, I have them sign a waiver that it's not medical advice because I don't want you to sue me if something goes wrong. But the way I say it is this: if I were you, this is what I would do. Okay, I'm not you. You have different genetics than I do. You eat differently, but based on what I know about you, if I were you, this is what I would do. You have to do what's best for you. But basically, if I were you, this is what I do. And I encourage everybody to do their own research. What I do with a lot of clients, I'll send them short YouTube videos going over what I've already told them, maybe going into more detail. And a lot of these are physicians that have a lot more letters after their name than I have. So it's not just me saying it, I can back it up with, and I also have tons of studies. Again, I'm kind of crazy. I get up early in the morning and I just read research papers all the time. It's just a hobby of mine. I like doing that. The other thing is, unfortunately, with most physicians, they're working a ton of hours. They don't have time to go home and read research papers. Okay, this is what I do. I read research papers and I have things that back it up. So a lot of times, doctors are not up on the latest research and the latest studies. In fact, with the direct primary care I had and her husband, we were talking about that. And so she says, give you an example. I have what's called the concierge doctor. With a concierge doctor, a direct primary care doctor doesn't take insurance, okay, basically. So you'll pay them so much per month. So with me, my wife owns a business. So what my wife does with her business, this comes out, fortunately, I don't have to pay for it. It comes out of my wife's business because it's a business expense. So my whole family goes to this doctor, and actually he's in Putnam, Connecticut. And actually I saw him yesterday, and it was interesting because, again, I'm a clinical biochemist, so we talk a lot of medical mumbo-jumbo stuff. So we have difference of opinion sometimes. But hopefully, well, he respects me. I just tell him, these are the lab work I want done. This is what I want. He just orders the lab work. And, we talk back and forth. So I had my annual physical with him yesterday. Now, I don't know if anybody wants to email me and let them know how long they spend on their annual physical, but I was in there for an hour and a half to 2 hours, okay, and I'm in good health. I'm on no meds. I got really zero medical problems. So it was just checking up. So I go in, they put me on, they do an EKG, my heart's good, they do my blood pressure, they do all that stuff. And so the nurse comes in first and does all the preliminary work, and they ask me a ton of questions. What are you eating? How much you exercise? A huge list of stuff they went over. That's about a half an hour with these RNs, these nurses. So I'm sitting with them. And again, the direct primary care doctor, again, feel free to email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I'll send you over. I'll give you an introduction to her if you want to meet with her. And so what we again went through half an hour with that. Then the doctor comes in and sits down. Is anything going on? Actually, I had a couple of questions for him. One of them was I was getting these almost bruising on my legs for no apparent reason, and I couldn't figure out why. Didn't bump into anything. So he poked around in there. He says, you got some blood vessels that are very close to the surface. No big deal. Don't worry about it. Poked around. Okay, no big deal. Then he says, I think I was diagnosed with a right inguinal hernia. That's kind of a groin hernia a while ago, and it kind of bothered me off and on. So we checked that out. Yeah, you got a hernia there, but it's not that bad. Just don't go crazy with stuff. So did the typical thing, but went through everything. How much you're exercising? What are you doing with here? What kind of supplements are you taking? What kind of food you're eating? Another hour with him. So it's either an hour and a half or 2 hours. You're not going to get that with allopathic or Western medicine. They're going to get you in, they're going to get you out. They may have the nurse do blood pressure and stuff like that, but they're not going to go into that kind of depth in terms of what's going on with you. So if you think about it, when was the last time you went to a physician, and the physician, after they ask you what's going on, maybe did your blood pressure and stuff like that, maybe stethoscope up to your heart, listen to this stuff. They ask you, what are you eating? Are you exercising? They don't have time to do this. Again, they get 13, 15 minutes. I don't know how long the average doctor spends on an annual physical, but I can't imagine it's that long. So what my direct primary care doctor that was here last week, she said that she had about 2,000 patients assigned to her, 2,000 patients. So what a direct primary care doctor does and what a concierge, they limit their practice. Once it's full, it's full. They're not taking any new patients because they have to, and again, the direct primary care doctor that was over here last week, what she said was, she spends, you go to see her, the very first hour is basically 2 hours. She's sitting down with you, she's talking what's your mental health like, what's this like, the other thing is, with my particular physician, and I know with this direct primary care doctor, they have a portal. So you can basically type in questions and I do this all the time. I'll ask questions, I want these lab works done. Also, you can call them. You can call them pretty much all the time. And you'll get the actual physician. The other thing they're doing now with allopathic or Western medicine is they have a lot of nurse practitioners. Nothing wrong with nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, or just RNs. Nothing wrong with RNs. But you may have 5 different people. You may not even see your doctor. You may call in and say this, and then the nurse or the PA or the NP is going to talk to you. They really don't know you. Again, they've got 2,000 to 3,000 patients in their clinic. I mean, they can't know you, but they can't know you personally. They're looking at your chart, and this is what they see. With a concierge doctor or a direct primary care doctor, they know you. I mean, in fact, she's going to know. She only has 30 patients. She's going to know you. She spent an hour sitting down with you, or my doctor spent an hour sitting down with you. He knows you. He remembers you, what's wrong with you, and the rest of this stuff. You're just not a faceless number on a chart. So again, I want to emphasize that basically your health is the most important thing. The other thing a lot of people will do now we have artificial intelligence. So you can go on ChatGPT and you can type in a lot of your symptoms, and they'll come back and let you know what's going on with that. So what I found is a lot of physicians are leaving because they're getting really depressed because they can't do what they want to do with their patients. That's why, in a way, you kind of have to be the CEO of your own health. You're the one that has to take care of yourself, because no one cares more about your health than you do. So you have to kind of watch that. I just want to want to back up. So I don't know whether you like the Trump administration, don't like it, but he has Casey Means. She's actually an ENT, ear, nose, and throat doctor, and she graduated from Stanford. She wrote a really good book. If you have a chance to read it, it's called Good Energy. And what happened with Casey is what happened with other doctors I know. They're leaving the mainstream medicine. So even though she got her MD, she did not renew her license because she said, I'm not really helping patients. So she wanted to go out there and do something bigger. A lot of people are saying, well, Trump put her in charge of this, of one of the health, the ABC health companies and the government, but she's not a doctor. Well, technically she is a doctor. She's got an MD, but she did not renew her license. So she's still a doctor, but she's not a practicing doctor. So what happened with her, interesting story in the book, and again, she's a doctor and she basically knows a hell of a lot more than the average person does. So her mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she went in at stage 4 cancer, and she asked the oncologist. She said, well, what's the prognosis? She's not good. She's maybe has 6 months, a year to live, not long. And then she said, well, we can give her chemo, we can give her radiation, we can do this, we can do that. And so she said to the oncologist, she said, well, how long, if we give her the chemo, much longer is she going to live? Maybe another month, maybe another 2 months. But, Casey Means knew if anybody's had to undergo chemotherapy or radiation, it's hell. It's not good. You're miserable. So she made the decision for her mother. She mentioned it with her mother. She says, I want her basically to have as good a quality of life as she can without being suffering, just to extend her life for another couple of weeks, a couple of months. And Casey Bean said that was the best decision they ever made, because her mother said the same thing, because her mother could still function and she wasn't throwing up. If anybody could do chemo, you're throwing up, you're weak, you can't get around and stuff like that. So her mother spent the last few months of her life, they're going to give her drugs to basically cut down on the pain. But she said she was able to go out there, and and Casey said she remembers the last few days of her mother's life. They were by a lake, and they were by looking at the lake and spending quality time together. And her mother said to her, she said, "This is the best decision I think you've made." So I just read another article. Again, this is the medical advice. But what happens is the way the whole thing with chemo and radiation works, and what it does is it's called your somatic cells, which is the cells in your body as opposed to cancer cells. Your somatic cells are stronger than the cancer cells. So what happens is the radiation is supposed to kill the weaker cells, the cancer cells. But what they found is the cancer cells that survive the radiation and the chemo, they escape and they go to different parts of the body. That's why you've probably heard people coming down with the recurrence of cancer a few years later, and it may not have happened. Maybe they start out with breast cancer or prostate cancer, but you wind up with liver cancer because the cancer cell escapes and it goes away. In fact, if anybody out there has had cancer and you're in remission, email me, Phil George, to try to done that. I'll give you some suggestions on how to keep those cancer cells at bay so they don't come back and go into another organ and give you a secondary cancer somewhere else. So again, if the other thing I just heard, that if you basically have terminal cancer, by you basically doing nothing, I just read that, I can send you the study I just read. You actually can live 4 times longer. So if they say you got a month to live, you may live 4 months longer, because again. And I have a relative his daughter's going through a really nasty, she had really bad colorectal cancer, had most of her colon removed, and it had to be fed through a feeding tube, and they wanted to give her chemo because they did a scan. They found that she had some cancer cells in her lymph nodes, and my cousin asked me, and she's very, very weak. She lost a ton of weight, so she's skin and bones. He asked me my advice, and I said I wouldn't. If that were my daughter, I wouldn't go through the chemo, because it's going to probably kill her, because she's so freaking weak from having everything taken out of her. At least try to get her strength built up. Maybe give her some good nutrients in the feeding tube. Try to get her, and then maybe consider it with the whole thing. But there's other things you can do in terms of, again, she's got cancer in lymph nodes. As long as those cancer cells don't metastasize, she may be okay. But again, not medical advice, but my cousin, he's obviously he's worried about his daughter. So again, these are tough things to do. The other problem with the medical system, and these are hard, true statistics. We pay the most for health insurance of any industrialized country, but we have the worst outcomes. What that means, we're paying the most for the worst. The other thing what you're finding is really the allopathic, the Western medical, in my opinion anyway, system is really dictated by insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. What they do is now they'll basically make a decision about whether or not, and they wind up denying a lot of claims. I had some statistics here. I just looked this up. 20% of all claims are denied. Okay, which means you go in there with a procedure, and you have to get pre-authorization to get something done. So let's just say, I don't know, let's just say you've got blood in your stools, or you're messed up and you're afraid you've got colorectal cancer. And you go in there and you want to have a colonoscopy done to see if you've got cancer. Now, most of these are covered. That's not a problem. But let's say you don't check all the boxes, or better still, your doctor doesn't check all the boxes. They may refuse that particular procedure for whatever reasons. Okay, you can certainly appeal it. You can do a lot of other stuff, I'll give you some real life examples with me, with the problem I've had. And I think I'm something up on the average person. I'm a biochemist. I understand this stuff. Most doctors, well, actually, most doctors only had one course in biochemistry, only had one course in nutrition. Again, they're going basically diagnose, adios, give you a pill, give you a procedure. That's kind of what they're trained to do. Again, nothing bad on doctors, but that's kind of, they look at a few minutes to see you and do everything else. So I had a condition, again, I track everything. I'm what they call a biohacker. So I know my heart rate, I know this, I know that, I know what's going on. I wear an Oura ring, measures everything in my body. Every morning I know what's going on. So I got a pretty good handle on my heart rate. So a few years ago, what happened was my heart was going through the roof. I usually have a normal heart rate of around 50. It was going 60, 70, up, down. I'd lay in bed and my heart is pumping out of my chest, and I was getting concerned, AFib, things like that. So I wound up basically, seeing, arrhythmia specialists, and I knew what they were going to say. They were going to put me on something called an ablation. Now, when an ablation is basically, they go into your heart and they burn out part of your heart muscle and try to get a new pathway, because your heart is an electrical pump. So what happens is something called your vagal nerve, and it goes from your brain away through your body. It also goes through your heart, and it sends an impulse for your heart to beat a certain way. Well, there's pathways in your heart. You can imagine like electrical wiring, right? And there's different wires in different places. So let's say this wire is messed up, and it's not getting the correct beat. So what they want to do, they want to burn out this part of the heart, this part of the heart, of the electrical system, and maybe rewire it to this part, like do rewiring of the heart, basically is what they're doing. So one of the things about heart muscle does not regenerate. So if you have a heart attack, they may tell you got a 20% damage. That means 20% of your heart is damaged. You're working with 80% of your heart. So when they do the burnout, they're burning out parts of your heart muscle, which means that's not coming back. I also found out that about 80% of the time this works okay, the ablation, it works. 20% of the time it doesn't work. They may have to go back and do it again. So this could happen, unfortunately, repeatedly. So I said, I don't think I want that done. I'm looking at other options. What's the root cause of this? So I did some research, and I should have known this, but I didn't. So I found out what they do. My friend Kelly Hamilton, the ICU nurse, in fact, she was on the show. She was on the show last year. I'm gonna have to have her back on again, because she's an ICU nurse. So there's something called the crash cart. So when I worked in the hospital, you probably heard that called code blue room 22. Okay, everybody rushes into room 22 with what they call a crash cart. And what they do is, with the crash cart, they'll wind up putting in an IV in you. And one of the things in the IV is high dose magnesium. And they found out that basically that, at least 40% of the population is magnesium deficient. And with the IV magnesium, it gets you out of the heart arrhythmia. So what I did is I said, well, geez, I'm probably magnesium deficient. And actually, even if they test your magnesium in your blood, that's not a good test. I'm running out of time. I can tell you why that's not a good test. There's a better test to test your magnesium. Email me, philgeorge@charter.net. In fact, if you have lab work you want reviewed with me, email me, philgeorge@charter.net. We can sit down at New Kitchen or someplace, Dunkin' Donuts, and I'll go over your lab work. And again, I don't charge for this. I have other ways of getting reimbursed. It doesn't cost you anything, but I have other ways of getting reimbursed. Long story short, because we're running out of time, what I did, I just really upped my magnesium. But there's all different types of magnesium. So again, you have to contact me to find out the right kind of magnesium to get you out of arrhythmia, or to help with your brain health, or other things like that. So we're coming up on the end of the show. Again, don't forget, Sunday the 29th, 184 West Boylston Street, or email me, philgeorge@charter.net. These are the stuff we cover, and again, after the seminar, we hang around. You can come up and ask me questions, and bring your lab work with me, and I'll go over stuff with you. So we hang around almost an hour, Kelly and I, just answering questions. So we're coming up to the end of the show. Again, feel free to email me, philgeorge@charter.net, and we'll be back next week. Thanks for tuning in. One of the most common questions I'm asked as a biochemist and health coach is, what are the best supplements to take? Choosing supplements is a tricky business. Many companies have poor quality control and questionable ingredients. In the past, I had to send clients to several different websites. I am now able to offer one-stop shopping for all the quality brands I recommend with no shipping cost and a lower price in most cases. Just email me, Phil George, at charter.net for a free consult.